praying for my ship to come in. I'm so tired of waiting, I'm all out of patience for this desert I've been in. I feel a storm brewing deep inside my bones. Gotta visit some old ruins, heal up some old wounds, so I can come into my own and finally feel like I'm at home. It's time for a change, a revolution, a breath of fresh air for you and me. It's time for a change, a new solution, 'cause the only thing I see is how good our lives could be. It's time for a change. Are you ready? The river is flowing and it's carrying you and me. There's no way of knowing, so just keep on going till it washes us to sea. Well, lately I've been dreaming about heaven on this earth, goodwill towards men and women, kindness and compassion, so we can finally feel our worth and make this place a better world. It's time for a change, a revolution, a breath of fresh air for you and me. It's time for a change, a new solution, 'cause the only thing I see is how good our lives could be. It's time for a change. Time for a change. It doesn't matter where you stand. We've got to solve things hand in hand. It's time for a change, a revolution, a breath of fresh air for you and me. It's time for a change, a new solution, 'cause we all want to be free. It's time for a change, a revolution, a breath of fresh air for you and me. It's time for a change, a new solution, 'cause the only thing I see is how great our lives could be. It's time for a change. Thank you.
The time was the 4th century BCE, the period of the warring states of China. There was an upcoming battle, and the Grand General had his general, General Li, with a gigantic army, the 1st Division. And they were up against General Su, this little tiny army. And the Grand General looked out at the horizon, seeing his gigantic army and this other little army. And he said to his advisor, Meng, he said, "That doesn't look good. It doesn't look good." And Meng was very confused. He was like, "Hey, Grand General, do you see our army? Do you see General Li? Do you see our manpower and our weaponry?" And the general looked very somber, and he shook his head. And he said, "Meng, follow me." And so they went, and there was this grandiose lake. And he threw a little piece of paper on the lake, and he stared at it. And Meng stared at it. said, I don't get it, Grand General. What is the message in this? And the general said, let me show you. And so they went over, and there was this very small babbling brook, and he had another little piece of paper, and he flung it on the babbling brook, and it floated away off. And he said, now do you see, Mung? Mung said, no, I do not see. And he said, notice our general, General Lee's position. He so arrogantly assumes victory. He assumes like he knows everything. And he's not willing to fight. And so do you see him way in the background? He's in the back. And do you see General Su? Do you see him on the front lines with his soldiers? Side by side. Just like the babbling brook, which rushes in one direction and carries the paper forward. It's the regiment that's small in size, but unified together in commitment that can make a change. Weaponry and manpower, they're important. But this general's leadership is what will determine victory. 4 days later, the armies fight. And lo and behold, General Su wins. That was a story from the Harvard Business Review, Parables on Leadership. And what we've been talking about, what we started at CBEC, we started a conversation about you're either playing the game of life or it's playing you. Or are you on the court or are you in the stands? There's a lot of people yelling from the stands, do this, do that, do this. I can't believe he did that. How could he do that? You might be that at the Seahawks game, not CBEC game, but the Seahawks game. You might be that at CBEC too, who knows? But are you in the court? Are you playing? Are you engaged? Or are you standing back and criticizing? Our book of the month is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, which is so good. I'm such a big fan of Brené Brown. And I've read almost all her books. This one is like a compilation of all of her books, and then it takes it a step further about leadership. And she had in her Daring Greatly book, she wrote this entire book around this one quote by Theodore Roosevelt. And the quote says, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again and again. Because there is no effort without error or shortcoming. But who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself for a worthy cause? Who, at best, knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who, at worst, if he fails, at least he failed while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat." And where do you stand? I know that there's been plenty of times in my life where I've been one of those cold and timid souls. But there came a point where I decided it was going to be different. I want to be a daring leader. I want to be somebody who dares greatly, who falls over and over again and continues to get up. because it's worth it to me. Living my life fully, freely, making a change in the world, uplifting other people and assisting other people in their own greatness is my mission. But it doesn't mean that I don't have setbacks, that I don't fall. The question is, how am I going through it? Am I leading from heart or am I leading from hurt? Now, this book is on leadership, and maybe you're in the room and you're like, hey, or online, hi. Maybe you're online or in the room and you're like, I'm not a leader, but I'm just going to give you a little evaluation. A couple of questions. Do you notice that you find the potential in people? Do you notice that you find the potential in processes? Do you have the courage to develop that potential in people or processes? And if the answer to that is yes, then you're a leader. Take it on. Get used to it. Brené Brown says, I define a leader as anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. Leading from hurt versus leading from heart. She says leading from hurt rather than leading from heart means we're working out our shit on other people. And because of that, we're not addressing the real driver of our pain, and that our behavior isn't an occasional angry slip. We're inflicting hurt instead of feeling the hurt, and the habit becomes inflicting hurt. So how do you know if you're leading from hurt? I mean, it could be any of us. We could be in our leadership position and we could be leading from hurt. And I don't know about you, but I want to keep improving who I am. So I take these questions on. Am I taking credit for ideas that aren't mine? By the way, this comes from Brené Brown's work. I just want to let you know. Okay. Are you always comparing yourself to others? Do you always know the answer and you're not interested in learning anything new? Do you have an insatiable appetite for recognition? Or do you have a zero risk tolerance? These are key signs that you may be leading from hurt. Now, I look at the list, and for me, it's like I have to be authentic and transparent, I feel, in order to get a good message out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that list and I'm going to say, where am I in that? Not where are you in that, where am I in that? And I have to say mine is number 2. Are you always comparing yourself to others? So when I'm comparing myself to others, that's the place when I know I'm leading from hurt. Because when I'm in comparison, I'm feeling less than or not enough. And that's the place of being hurt. That's not the place of empowerment. When I'm in the place of empowerment, I'm loving myself fully and freely. So one thing to do is to figure out, who can you get feedback from? It's really important. Feedback is so important. As a matter of fact, it's incredibly vulnerable to get feedback. But sometimes when you're stepping into the fullness of your being and you're doing something courageous, a lot of people out there are in the stands and they want to give you the feedback. Now, how do I get to the place of, I could define myself by what everybody thinks, or I could stop caring what everyone thinks. There's got to be a place in the middle. Because I can't be the person who listens to everybody, and I can't be the person who doesn't listen to anybody. I have to be willing to hear feedback and grow. But I have to be willing to listen from people who are going to love me through it. They're going to give me feedback in a way that's about loving me and seeing my greatness. So I have a little bit of homework for you. So you're going to go home. What you're going to do is you're going to get a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of paper, a little tiny piece of paper. You're going to evaluate your life, and you're going to find out who can you trust their feedback. And you're going to write them down on a piece of paper. Now, this is from Brene Brown. She calls it your square squad. They're going to be your square squad. Write them down, and then you're going to fold up that little 1 inch thing, and you're going to put it in your wallet. And let them know, reach out to the people that you have on that 1 inch by 1 inch square. Tell them, I'm getting clear on whose opinions matter to me. I'm grateful that you care enough about me to be honest and to be real with me. And so I want you to know that you're part of my square squad. You're on the piece of paper of the people who I will listen to. Even though it's incredibly difficult and vulnerable, I know you give me feedback because you care about me. So one thing you can do is really lead from your heart. Be willing to be open. So we talked about leading from hurt. How do we lead from heart? The first thing that you do to lead from heart is by attending your own fears, feelings, and history. If you don't do that, you're going to be managing your own unproductive behaviors for the rest of your life. You'll be doing the same thing over and over and over again, with having a relationship that doesn't work out over and over and over again, and you're the common denominator. Maybe it's time to start looking at yourself. That's the first thing that you can do. And the way to do it is by taking a class. We teach these things here. We teach you how to take your own life on so that you can self-evaluate and figure out a way that works instead of a way that isn't working. Now, I want my life to work, and I want to be doing things that bring me joy, and I want to be a person who brings upliftment to other people. But it took me time to get there. I didn't have this teaching when I was growing up, and maybe many of you didn't either. So I encourage you to take Beyond Limits. And if you've already taken it, take it again. I encourage you, if you're really looking for something to do with Kathy Ann, take Self-Mastery if you've already taken Beyond Limits. No matter what, we have a core of classes that are about you taking yourself on, specially designed for you. So I encourage you to take that first step, leading from heart, investing time in yourself. The second step is staying curious about your own blind spots. So if you stay curious about your own blind spots, you learn how to pull those issues into view. And then you can help benefit yourself by not having those blind spots. And then you can also learn how to do it in a way that supports other people seeing their own blind spots in a loving and kind manner. So I don't know if you've heard about Johari window, but the Johari window model is like all of us have, we know what we know, right? I know what I know. And then there's this place where like, I know what I don't know. And then there's a place, I don't know what I don't know. That's your blind spot. Blind spot. So I may know how to speak. I don't know how to do rocket science, and I know I don't know how to do that. But then there's the area of like, I don't know what I don't know. How do I even find that out? Well, it's helpful to get other people to point it out. What I do know is what I've learned on my privilege. My privilege is a blind spot. That's a place where I'm learning that I haven't been able to see, but I'm learning about it. There's other blind spots that we all have, and it's if I'm willing to look there and grow from there, that I'm willing to embrace the fullness of myself and transcend what I've been right now into the next highest, best iteration of what I love for myself to be in this world. So I read a story about Dr. Josh Misner. He is a professor of communication in North Idaho College. And one day he was hanging out with his buddy, and they were chatting along and everything. And his buddy was like, I hate it when you do that. He was like, what? What are you talking about? He said, I was chatting and I was talking to you, and then all of a sudden, your eyes glazed over. And I could tell you were starting to form an opinion, and you were only thinking about what you were going to talk next to me about. And he was like, that is such a lie. I don't do that. That is BS. I did not do that. And he's like, you just did it. What are you talking about? He's like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to ask my wife. So he asked his wife. Lo and behold, his wife was like, oh yeah, you do that all the time. And he's like, I've been married to you forever, and you never told me this. And she's like, yeah, that's because you always get defensive about it. Look at you right now. By the way, professor of communication. And so he realized it was true. And he needed to work on that because he wanted to have a better relationship with his best friend who pointed it out to him, and a better relationship with his wife who was willing to tell him. It's uncomfortable to receive that kind of feedback, but he was more interested in being a better person and having deeper relationships than he was in just being defensive. Although he was defensive for many years, he finally was willing to just let it sink in and change himself. And that takes real courage. So of course I go home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this on my wife. I'm going to ask her, like, what is a thing that is really annoying that I do? And I will sit here and I will listen and not be defensive. By the way, this is your homework. Okay, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to torture you for a moment. Okay. This is an exercise by Dr. Josh Misner, communications professor. He says, contact a close friend, family member, or mentor, someone who knows you well. Ask them to share a meal with you, and then during the meal, ask that person to share with you the one thing that annoys him or her about you. And then before the response, tell them that nothing is off limits and that you are not allowed to respond defensively. Only listen with an open heart and mind. So I asked Gina, and she said, you always try to make me positive when I'm angry. I just want to be angry sometimes. Just let me be angry. Now, I don't know how many ministers or practitioners in the room might have partners who have given them this feedback, or maybe you've been in this teaching for a while and we're like, let's look at the positive. I'm like, you're so mad. Why don't you look at the positive? I just want to be angry. Okay. It's okay to feel your feelings, by the way. And it's okay for other people to feel their feelings. And that's my continual lesson, is to allow people to process. And part of it for me is it's hard for me to process my own feelings and my own emotions. And so it makes me uncomfortable when people are processing their emotions. So I have to be okay with somebody just being, allowing them to be. It's okay to process. So the third thing to do is something that Brené Brown said. She said, like all of us, most of the daring, transformational leaders that she's worked with have overcome hurtful experiences, from childhood illness, painful family histories, violence, trauma. She said many of her most courageous transformational leaders are in the midst of marriages that are failing, children in rehab, or they have a health crisis. And she said the difference from leading from hurt versus leading from heart is not what you're experiencing or what you've experienced in the past, but it's what you do with that. How you are in the midst of it. Who are you in the midst of it? How are you going to walk through this experience? Now, what I love, I've heard Kathy Ann say this teaching allows us to walk through these experiences as greater people, kinder, nicer, more loving individuals. And some people get a certain diagnosis, and instead of that diagnosis being the prognosis of who they are, they change that and they utilize it for the betterment of who they are. And some people can have their most challenging thing be the catalyst for the best thing in their life. I don't know about you, but I had that C diagnosis, the cancer diagnosis. Yeah. I had a biopsy and a little skin patch, and they said, oh, it's cancer. It's like, but where do I go? I'm allowed to process through my emotion, and then I go, how am I going to utilize this so I can be a better person? So, and by the way, they removed it. It's all gone. It's 100% gone. But it doesn't mean, yeah, thank you. But it doesn't mean that people aren't in this room with that same diagnosis or another diagnosis. And it doesn't have to be your prognosis. It doesn't have to be the end of you. You can either live a full life or you can die living a full life. Or you can stop living. And you have a choice. The first two are ways to live through things that are challenging and utilizing them as a benefit for humanity, a benefit for yourself. Or you can choose to say, this is the end of me. Or you can choose to say, this is the beginning of me. Because I'm not going to let anything stand in the way for me living the fullest, most authentic, freest life I can ever live. I'm not going to let anything get in the way of me being of benefit and of help to other people. I'm not going to let this thing get in the way of me seeing an idea, a vision of a world that works for everyone and stepping into it in a way that impacts people. So who are you being? Are you leading from hurt or are you leading from heart? You can't get into courage without experiencing vulnerability. This is the key. This is like the meat. Brené Brown says, this is the heart of daring leadership. You can't get to courage without experiencing vulnerability. To be a professor in a college, that's what Michelle Chappel, the first time I heard her play, she was a professor at a college. And she stepped out of the safety net of education to live a free, authentic life with a message that transforms and empowers people. Everybody has an opportunity to step in the fullness of their freest, most expressive life. But you have to have the courage to do so, and it means you have to be vulnerable. Brené Brown asked a group of soldiers. She said, vulnerability is what we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And as a side note, if you're in the middle of risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure, this may be the time. She said, can you give me a single example of courage that you've witnessed in another soldier or experienced in your own life that did not require experiencing vulnerability? And the soldiers could not say anything. Can you give me an example of courage you've witnessed in another soldier or experienced in your own life that did not require experiencing vulnerability? Courage, vulnerability, they're two sides of the same coin. So vulnerability is not a weakness, it is courage. Here's some examples of vulnerability. adapting to change. Perhaps you're having change in your life right now. It's a time to be courageous. Having a hard conversation. Getting and receiving feedback. Problem solving. Ethical decision making. Recognizing and uplifting others. All of that is vulnerable, and all of that takes courage. Brene says to foreclose on vulnerability and our emotional life out of the fear that the cost will be too high is to walk away from the very thing that gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Are you willing to walk away from your purpose and your meaning, or would you like to step into it and embrace it? How do I lead from heart and not from hurt? The first thing, give credit where credit is due and be humble. Number 2, stop comparing yourself to others and start loving yourself more. Number 3, be teachable. Take a class. Be willing to learn. And number 4, take a risk. So if you're willing to lead from your heart and not from your hurt, I encourage you to step into this idea of being a daring leader, being courageously vulnerable, and being willing to fall over and over again, getting into the ring, having your face with dirt and sweat, and yet getting up time and time again and knowing that in the end, your purpose, your life's work was worth it. And when you do that, you inspire others to do the same because we belong together. And we need each other to keep doing this with each other. So take your homework, go find your people, and figure out what it is that I need to do to step into the fullness of who I truly am, and go do it. And you might fall, but we're all here to pick you up over and over again. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to do that? Come on now. Are you willing to do that? Bring it on. And so it is. I'm so grateful for this group. I'm so grateful for the people who are here in this room and the people who are watching on live stream for being willing to open up their hearts and souls to see a greater possibility for themselves and for this world. And I send my love right here and now to the people in Texas where there was yet another mass shooting. And I send my love to the other side of the world where there's a hurricane. And I send my love to the people who are lonely right now, who think or are questioning, is it even worth it? And I remember that we're all here together, interconnected. And I embrace and know that right here and now that there is a greater source. It is called God, and it is flowing through each and every one of us. And as I step into the fullness, my authenticity of shining my light and being who I am, I recognize and know I give others permission to do the same. And I am guided and directed by God that knows only good, that knows only love. And it guides me step by step by step. And even if I fall, I am cradled in the arms of the divine. Even if I get a diagnosis, I am cradled in the arms of the divine. It does not define me. I am love and joy and power and grace, and I express it in everything and everywhere I go, and nothing will stop me from being that truth, from being that declaration of love, from being that expression of God's self on this planet, so that other people can see it in my eyes and I can remind them and they can see it in their eyes. For we're just here to remember who we truly are. And we remember right here and right now. And for that, I'm grateful. So I surrender into this truth. I allow love to pour in. I welcome it. I embrace it. I accept it. And I imagine that right here and now, I am transformed. And I know it is because of this truth. Right here, right now. And so it is. Thank you.